Thesis statements matter. To bring you back to your days of school, thesis statements matter because purpose matters. See, that's what I learned my 9th grade AP World History class. Coach Carson was my teacher. Excellent teacher. And what he told us at the beginning of the semester, because we were going to write a lot of essays, he told us thesis statements matter because purpose matters. See, when you write an essay, you write a paper, you write a book, thankfully we never did that, you have to tell your reader why you're writing and what you're writing about. They need to know your purpose. That's why thesis statements exist. It is a clear, succinct summary of what your purpose is in writing. For example, and this was an AP class, advanced placement, right? So we were supposed to be at a higher level. So he wouldn't permit us to have some kind of boring one-dimensional thesis statement on a topic, for example, like iron ore played a significant role in the development of civilization in the Fertile Crescent. And some of you are like, that sounds great to me. Well, that was way more advanced than where I was starting out in AP World History as a freshman. But Coach Carson was going to have none of that weak thesis statement action. See, anybody could write a thesis statement like that. But if we were going to get college credit for this class, right, if I was going to impress the AP graders at the end of the year with my writing, then the first way to capture their attention was to have a compelling thesis statement. I needed something that communicated with power, with force, with clarity, with skill, sophistication, and style. So here's the kind of thesis statement he told us we would need. Iron ore was instrumental in the development of early civilization in the Fertile Crescent because it enhanced the scope of agricultural production. It increased the potency of military technology, and it accelerated the pace of metallurgical developments. Now that is like a 6, which is the highest grade possible, on an AP exam right there. And Coach Carson was like, now that's a real thesis statement, because there you told them your purpose. You said it clearly. It was multi-layered, complex, but it was clear, and now they know exactly what you're talking about. So thesis statements matter because purpose matters. And maybe you had a professor like that in one of your courses in high school or early college, and they really emphasized the importance of nailing a thesis statement. Well, I think Solomon may have taken the same class that I did with Eddie Carson. Because if you look at chapter 1 of Proverbs, you find a remarkable thesis statement for why he wrote the book of Proverbs. In Proverbs 1 verses 2-6, he is going to lay out a skillful, sophisticated, magnificently crafted purpose statement, thesis statement for the book of Proverbs. Because Solomon knew what Coach Carson knew. If you're going to hook your reader, you need to tell them clearly why you're writing and why they should care. Why your material is worth their consideration. And so, that is exactly what we find in Proverbs 1, 2-6. You find the purpose of Proverbs, which is what I've titled tonight's message, the purpose of Proverbs. And Solomon will lay out in verses 2-6, 7 distinct reasons why you need his book. As the reader, you could sort of interpret as 7 benefits that I will gain personally from reading the book of Proverbs. Because if there is one thing Solomon is very intent on, it's that you read his book. But he doesn't just want you to read his book. He wants you to read it, study it, apply it, and live it. But he's smart enough to understand that people don't read things that they don't think has value. So he went to all the trouble up front, right out of the gate, to tell you why this book is so critical for your life. And Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, other than Jesus. So if he thinks this is a book worth reading, pretty safe bet it's a book worth reading. So in Proverbs 1, Because I agree with Solomon. This is a book you need to read. This is a book you need to study. A book you want to in depth apply to your life. We're going to walk through Solomon's thesis statement this evening. Why did he write Proverbs? What's the purpose of Proverbs? He's going to tell us in verses 2 to 6. So here's the purpose of Proverbs, that you will walk away with 7 practical benefits for your life. And he lays them out in no uncertain terms in verses 2 to 6. So before we start studying the book of Proverbs, I want you to be compelled that it's worth your time, that you are convinced that it's worth your time. Solomon must have thought similarly because he wrote this magnificent thesis statement. So we're going to discover this evening 7 benefits, 7 blessings that you as an individual will receive if you will study this book. You ready for 7 personal benefits to your life? All right, benefit number 1. Look at verse 2. Benefit number 1 is you will gain wisdom. That's pretty clear. To know wisdom and instruction. Right? Verse 1 says, hey, here's who wrote it. Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Well, we looked at him last week. We know who he is. To know wisdom and instruction. You could sort of fill in the words. I'm writing this so that you will know wisdom and instruction. Well, incidentally, that word know, that's a little bit more than how we think of knowing in English, right? We kind of think it has to do with facts, like I know how far the sun is from the earth. I know how many constellations there are in the Milky Way galaxy. That's just a fact, a data point. But for Solomon, when he talks about knowing in the book of Proverbs, it's knowing in a relational context. It's not bare information, right? This is actually intimate knowledge, experiential knowledge of some topic. So when he says, I want you to know wisdom and instruction, what he's saying is, I want you to have an intimate, personal relationship with wisdom. Not just facts here. This is a relationship that's meant to impact your life. Okay, so then what is this wisdom that's meant to be my new best friend? Well, the basic idea of wisdom is skillful living. Right? If you read it, it's used a bunch of times in the Old Testament. And the basic idea in almost all the occurrences has to do with skill. For example, Deuteronomy 34:9. The term appears and it talks about having skill in leadership and skill in administration. In Exodus 28:3, Moses uses it to describe skill, the skill of a craftsman in building priestly garments and designing and stitching out priestly garments. Well, the same word is used in Ezekiel 27:8 to describe skilled sailors, guys who are good at piloting a ship. But the idea of wisdom is more than just simple skill. It's not just, oh, you have a technical expertise. No, the idea of wisdom is really, it became known as some sort of skill in living. You know how to live skillfully. Think of it as like a personal coach. Wisdom is your personal life coach, here to help you navigate the complexities of money, of work, of marriage, of relationships, of speech, romance. Wisdom says, I want to be your best friend. I want to give you the skill of knowing how to live well. And my skill, by the way, encompasses every compartment of your life, right? It's multifaceted. Another author defines wisdom like this. He says, it's the art of getting along successfully with God and with men. And I wonder how many of you might need a little help getting along successfully with God and people, right? Who doesn't want to have a healthy, productive, satisfying relationship with your parents or your boss or your teammates on the soccer team, or your roommates, or your girlfriend, wife, husband, children. So what wisdom says is, I can teach you how to be skilled at life. Not skilled so you make a lot of money and you got the biggest, following on TikTok, but so you can have life that is meaningful and full according to God, which we'll get to later. By the way, this wisdom that Solomon proposes that you walk away with, he says in the book of Proverbs, it is so valuable. Well, let me tell. Here's what he says, Proverbs 3:15. She, wisdom, she is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. Nothing you desire compares with wisdom. And then he's going to say in Proverbs 16:16, because he really wants you to know the high priority of wisdom, he says this, how much better it is to get wisdom, and to get understanding is to be chosen above silver. Understanding is a synonym for wisdom in that verse. In other words, if I come to you with an offer and I say, listen, I got a suitcase filled with $100 million in cash, or you can have all the wisdom of Proverbs, if you took the cash, you'd be an absolute fool. Proverbs says the wisdom is infinitely more valuable than the cash. But the wisdom he offers is in here. So it's actually accessible. So what you need is wisdom, and what Solomon is proposing is that I'll give you wisdom, right? You're going to get wisdom for skillful living. So the first benefit he wants you to receive as the reader, not just the reader, but actually the diligent reader, is that you'll get wisdom. You'll get skill in living. And as we continue on in our series, we're going to explore the different areas of life where this wisdom will give you the skill you need to make the most out of life according to God's perspective. Benefit number 2, instruction. Instruction. And Solomon's going to tell us what that means. And by the way, we're going to look up the definition of a lot of words in this section because they seem to have pretty similar meanings. And so there's nuance that we're going to have to look at in order to really get what he's saying, because a lot of these words seem to say the same thing, but it's in the nuance that defines exactly why he used the term he did. So instruction. He says this, verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction. Depending on what translation you have, your Bible might say discipline, right? It might say discipline. And you hear that, and I don't know, maybe you're thinking personal discipline. Oh, you get up every morning at 4:45 and you go to the gym and you eat clean, and so that's discipline. Well, that's not the discipline he's got in mind here. Right? The discipline he's got in mind here is more of like the discipline when you maybe do something you're not supposed to. Right? And this is actually a discipline. The idea is if you don't do what's right, there's punishment. Right? That's the notion of this instruction, this discipline here. Maybe this was you as a kid. Your mom says, hey, don't touch the hot stove. It will burn you. Do not touch it. And because you're a 3-year-old who's headstrong and wicked in your heart, when mom goes away and goes to answer the phone or something, you look up at that stove and then you touch it because you want to do what you want to do. Well, why did mom tell you not to touch the stove? Because it's hot, duh, it's going to burn your fingers. But you do it anyways. And then you realize that was a really bad idea. Now you're crying because your fingers are burned. And then you're going to cry more because mom's going to come and swat you on the bum. But not because she's a mean lady, because she knows if you don't listen to instruction in your life, you're going to get into a whole lot of trouble. It's really going to be a bad life course. So there is discipline here, not about punishment. I'm not trying to mete out punishment and be angry. No, this is discipline designed to help you. It is discipline designed to correct you, train you, make you better so that you avoid the punishment that comes from ignoring instruction. That's what this word is. That's the flavor of this word. Right? He's going to use the word discipline or instruction more times in the book of Proverbs. For example, Proverbs 12:1. Same word, but he uses it, he calls it discipline. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. And you probably think, oh, you're not really supposed to use that word. Well, Solomon did. Whoever hates reproof is stupid, but if you love discipline, then you love knowledge. That's a good thing. And then Proverbs 13:1, a wise son accepts his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. That doesn't sound like a good thing. Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will remove it far from him. Some of you as kids may have been well acquainted with a rod of discipline. That just means getting spankings. I got my fair share of those. But the role of discipline is to keep you from doing things you shouldn't that will bring harm to you. Right? And so here's the beauty of what Proverbs has for you. It is a book that will discipline you. It will challenge you. It will confront you. It will call you out on your foolishness. You might be blind to your foolishness. Proverbs is not. Solomon was not. So when you read Proverbs, one of the benefits he wants you to gain is you'll read it and it will rebuke you. It's just going to call out how foolish you're acting. For example, some of you are lazy. Some of you are procrastinators, right? And it's hard to get up on time, and it's hard to do your homework, and it's hard to go to work. But here's what Proverbs does. It swats you on the backside with the verse like Proverbs 10:5. He who gathers in summer is the son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest, when you're supposed to be working, he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully. So laziness, that's pretty shameful, Proverbs says. For some of you, that might sting. Good. That's why Solomon wrote this book. Another one. Maybe you like to gossip, right? Maybe you're pretty loose with your words and you don't have a problem talking bad about other people because it's true. So if I say he's stupid and, well, everybody knows he's stupid, it's true, then that's okay. No. Proverbs has got a word for you. Proverbs is going to kick you in the shin with a verse like Proverbs 10:18. He who conceals hatred has lying lips, and he who spreads slander is a fool. Some of you, that's like a punch in the gut because you're a slanderer and you talk bad about other people. And Solomon is telling you here, that's a bad way to live. Heed my warning and stop. That's what Solomon is saying. Or maybe you're young and you think you're really smart. Maybe you are actually really smart. And you think that I probably know most things. I don't really need anybody to correct me because generally what I think is right. And so I'm not really teachable. I don't like to be corrected. I don't like people to reprove me and tell me I'm doing things wrong. Well, Proverbs is going to slap you in the face with a proverb like 12:1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. He who hates reproof is stupid. That's the discipline of Proverbs. And it's not comfortable, right? Because depending where you're at in life, you read those and it really confronts you where you're at. And nobody likes to be confronted. But this is a book that will step on your toes if you get out of line. Because Proverbs and the writer, Solomon, he cares about you. And he wants you to grow and he doesn't want you to do foolish things. So he is going to write this book so that you will intimately know instruction or discipline. Right? That's the second benefit he's got for you. Third benefit is in the very same verse. We're still in verse 2. Benefit number 3, discernment. Maybe that's a word you've heard, but kind of a fuzzy definition, right? What's the difference between wisdom and discernment, knowledge, understanding, insight? Kind of all seem like the same thing, right? But here he says, I want you to discern the sayings of understanding. Sayings of understanding are basically sayings that deliver wisdom to you, knowledge and good information. He says, I want you to be able to discern things. That word discern, it means you've got penetrating insight. You're able to look at a situation and you're able to separate what is good from what is bad, what is wise from what is foolish, what is helpful from what is hurtful. You've got the knowledge that you can look at it and assess it and analyze it and sort of break it up into categories like that. And then you make your choices based off that. So the classic example, and I think I mentioned this last week too, is King Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 3, there's a story, 16 to 28, verses 16 to 28, where Solomon says, I need a discerning heart, God. And so God gifts it to him. And then there's a situation he's confronted with, right? These two prostitutes come in, and one of them says, hey, they both had babies, by the way. One of them says, hey, she slept on her baby and stole mine, because apparently she rolled over, killed her baby, but they're in the same place. So she goes and takes the live baby, sleeps with it, puts the dead one with her, and says, no, this is my baby, the live one. And the other woman says, no, that's my baby. You stole my baby. And then they're both going back and forth in front of Solomon, and he doesn't know the women. He doesn't know what happened last night in their bedroom. And so he has no clue. So what would you do if you were in that situation, right? How do you discern? How do you divide the good from the bad? The truth from the lie? You need discernment. Here's what Solomon did. He says, give me a sword, guard. So he brings him a razor sharp sword. He says, cut the baby down right the middle. Give her half and her half. And then the real mom says, no. Give her the baby. Don't kill the baby. And the not real mom says, yeah, cut that baby. If I can't have it, nobody can have it. And then Solomon says, well, she's obviously not the mom. Give it to that lady. Wow, that's discernment. Somehow he pierced to the heart of the situation and separated truth from error. That's what you need. You need what Solomon just displayed, which is called discernment. See, one other commentator, here's how he described what discernment is. It's the ability to look at two things and see what God sees. In essence, you can sort of pierce through the fuzz and the fog and the haze, and then God's perspective shines out there, and so you now know what to do. You know how to assess that situation. That's discernment. And so Solomon says, I want you to have discernment. That's why I'm writing this book. So that you'll have wisdom, so that you'll have instruction, and so you'll have discernment, because you're going to find yourself in many a situation in life where you need to know what's true and what's not true, what's good and what's best. And Solomon says, I can help you with that. In fact, I wrote a whole book on that. So let me give you a couple scenarios, right? Because you're going to be in a lot of situations in your life, especially as young people. You've got a lot of years ahead of you. And if you want to talk to Mike or Gene, some of the older folks, then they can tell you, oh yeah, you need discernment. You're going to come into some real tricky, thorny situations where you need to be able to divide between what's good and best, what's true and false. For example, gentlemen, let's say you have a really cute coworker. She's very cute. She's fit. She's trim. She's bubbly. She's got a great personality. And she, oddly enough, seems to maybe like you. And then you're just shocked at like, wow, she's so gorgeous. And I've always dreamed of a woman so pretty. I just never thought I could get her. And then you think, well, she's got to be the one for me. Like, oh, she's so pretty. And then Proverbs is going to speak into that situation with a verse like this. As a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is a beautiful woman who lacks discretion. And you say, oh, I never even thought to think about her character. She's just gorgeous. But Proverbs says, you'd be surprised what guys will do. But not these guys. They're noble. But Proverbs speaks into that and says, hey, you need more criteria. Beauty, not enough, right? If she doesn't have discretion, if she doesn't have the character element, she's not your girl. But here's another one. Ladies, maybe this is you. Doesn't have to deal with relationships, but say you're at work, right? You're not married, so you have to have a job. And until you get married, you're going to keep working. And so maybe there's a manager position at work. Pays more, better hours, more responsibility, sure, but you're going to make a lot more money. And so you say, well, I want that manager position because maybe I want to move out of my parents' house. I want to get my own apartment. I need a bigger income. I want that manager position. And because you think, oh, this is what matters, maybe you're willing to throw your coworker under the bus in a meeting with your boss to make her look dumb so that you get the position. Because you see all kinds of benefit with that job. And if it costs you by stepping on her shoulders to climb the ladder, no big deal, right? Except Solomon says in Proverbs 11:22, a gracious woman attains honor, and ruthless men attain riches. Right? So Solomon says, actually, there's a different way you ought to be assessing the situation here. You want honor? It comes by being gracious, not by stabbing somebody in the back to get ahead. One more. We're all going to be there and say 5 months from now, taxes, right? I know, get excited. Taxes, right? So here's what you're going to face when you do your taxes. Maybe you got some jobs where you got paid under the table in cash. And you say, hey, I don't have to report that. It's cash, except the IRS doesn't see it that way. And in your mind, you say, yeah, but like the government wastes my money anyways. So why do I need to give more money to a government that's going to waste my hard-earned money that I made? By the way, I want to get an apartment or I want to save up a down payment for a house. So I kind of need that money more than Uncle Sam does. I'm not going to report that money. Except then you remember what you heard me teaching here, Proverbs 10:2. Solomon speaks out and he says, ill-gotten gains do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. And then what you thought was a cut and dry decision, Solomon tells you, you actually were thinking about it all wrong. You better report that income. Ill-gotten gains don't profit. See, that's discernment. You need discernment. And those are 3 situations, and there's 3,000 more you're going to encounter. And Solomon says, I'll give you discernment. Read my book. There's another benefit he's got for you. This one is in verse 3. I'm going to call it wise behavior. Principally because that's what he calls it. So he says in verse 3, he wants you to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity. So receiving here, grasp it is what he's saying. I want you to take it, grasp it, hold on to it, acquire it, make it your possession. Keep this thing. Well, what do you want me to acquire and hold on to? Well, I want you to hold on to instruction in wise behavior. That wise behavior, it has to do with cleverness, insight. And when you combine that word instruction, which is the same one we saw in verse 2, discipline, instruction and wise behavior, what that really means is, you could think of it this way, intelligent discipline. Well, what does that mean, intelligent discipline? Well, what this means, it's kind of like an advanced level of discernment. You can not only look at a situation and assess what's good and bad, true and false, you also know why it's good and bad and why it's true and false. So this is next level. You can distinguish now, and you know the reasons why you can distinguish this from that. And then actually Solomon says this kind of intelligent discipline, it has a moral implication because it results in 3 behaviors: righteousness, justice, and equity. If you're the kind of person who reads this book and then you have wise behavior, it looks like moral qualities: righteousness, justice, equity. Righteousness is how you live with other people in a way that's consistent with God's law. It's horizontal. Justice is more of an internal thing. That's conforming your life to the rules and standard of God. That's what justice is. And equity means straightness. No crookedness, no twists and turns. In fact, it's used in Isaiah 26:7 to say that the path of the righteous is level, smooth. No bumps, no twists in the road. And so those 3 words, that's a composite picture. That's the summary of how somebody lives when they're living according to God's word and when they have this advanced level of insight. Why should I do it, or what should I do? And I also know why I should do it. And if you live that kind of life, you're going to look like Proverbs 10:9. He who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. See, if you want to walk securely, where your life, you're not afraid of being found out for secret things. Well, then what you need is this wise behavior that manifests itself, rather, in righteousness, justice, and equity. So benefit number 4, wise behavior. Benefit number 5, prudence and discretion. Look at verse 4. Why are you writing this, Solomon? Well, because I want you to have, he says, I want to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. Well, this is interesting because for the first time now, Solomon tells you, hey, I got two groups in mind as my audience. I'm not limiting just to two groups, but I'm thinking as I write this, I need two groups of people to really listen to me. Everyone's going to benefit. Two groups in particular are really going to benefit. That's what Solomon says. So he has the naive, that's one category. The youth is a second category. Well, who is the naive? Does that mean they're just kind of like ignorant? Well, kind of, yeah. So that word, naive, it comes from a root verb that means to be open, right? Imagine an open door. A naive person has a mind that has an open door. Anything can come in, anything can go out. And in our culture, that's actually noble, right? In our culture, you might even be told like, hey, you need to be more open-minded. You think it's inappropriate for a man to love a man. You know what? You're just a bigot. Yeah, you need to be more open-minded. You're so narrow, you Christians. Or maybe you're at work and you have a conversation at lunch with some friends and then you say, well, you know what? I just think it's so harmful for people to have sex, change their gender, like gender reassignment surgeries. That's just so harmful. It's so unnatural. It really shouldn't be done. And somebody chastises you and says, you know what? You're such a narrow-minded jerk. You Christians, you should be more open-minded. You should be more mindful of how other people feel and how they want to express themselves and they need to be who they are. You know, why are you so narrow? And in their mind, open-minded is noble and it's right and it's good. But typically it has to do with the fact that they want you to accept all manner of perversion and sin. That's kind of how our culture views being open-minded. But and it's a good thing. And in the Bible, being open-minded is a bad thing. If you were talking to a Hebrew and you said, man, I so admire your open mind, Bryce, then he would say, you need to shut your mind. That is not a good thing. You don't need to have an open mind because people who are open-minded, they're gullible, they're impressionable. Reminds me when I go back to Arkansas, especially in the summer, right? It's hot, it's humid. We have a lot of bugs in Arkansas. Kind of stinks. Tons of mosquitoes. And so when I go back home, I live next door, my parents live next door to one of my brothers. He's got 5 kids. And so they're young. And grandma, grandpa live next door, aka my parents. So these kids are always coming in the house, right? They love to be in grandma's house. And so they're in there, doors open, doors closed, doors open, doors closed, constantly in and out, in and out. And my mom will say, pick one. Stay in, stay out. You can't keep opening the door. You're letting all the mosquitoes in. And they do. It's terrible. So the fact is, when you open the door, the bugs come in. Close the door. And they'll like sit at the door and they'll keep it open as they deliberate. Do I want to go in or do I want to go out and play in the driveway with the buggies? And mom's like, shut the door, please. And I'm like, shut the door. Because when I sit at the table to eat, then the mosquitoes come after my legs and it's awful. So that's a little bit like what it is to have an open mind according to Solomon. You let all the bugs in. You let all the bad ideas in. You let all the things you don't want in the house, in the house. And the house in this case is your mind. And so Solomon says, you do not want an open mind. That's why I'm writing this book, so the people with open minds will learn to close that door. And there are a lot of people with open minds today, right? Even Christians. And that doesn't mean they're accepting all kinds of necessarily sinful thoughts, but they don't have strong convictions about anything. They don't really have a strong moral foundation that guides how they make decisions. You know, when they think about who am I going to date, it's like, well, who's pretty, who's available, who will even answer my calls. It's not character, nobility, connection to church, love for Christ, commitment to discipleship and service. That's really not their guiding principle in who I'm supposed to date. And so they're really vulnerable to all kinds of garbage because their mind is open. Any bum off the street can walk in, and any bad idea at a culture can waltz right in the front door of their minds. These are the kind of people where it's like, hey, somebody, a coworker says, hey, you want to come over this weekend? I just got some weed. And they're like, well, sure, why not? I'm open to new experiences. They don't have any other category or moral framework to give them discernment in making choices. Or maybe it's like, hey, come over to my house this week and we're going to watch the new series on Netflix. Well, you just know it's loaded with sex and bad language and other stuff. But it's like, sure, why not? Or somebody says, maybe you're in college, and one of your classmates say, hey, you got to come with me on Friday. There's a new popular speaker, and he's going to talk about manifesting your destiny and the power of positive thinking, and you can recreate your world. And you're like, well, sure, why not? And then you get yourself into all kinds of bad stuff. What you need is prudence, Solomon says. If you got an open mind, Solomon says, I really want to give you prudence. You need prudence. Well, what's prudence? It means cleverness. It means being shrewd. It really has the idea of considering before rushing in. Because people with an open mind, anything comes in. They got no gate. They got no door. They got no barrier. Any idea, any kind of influence just walks right in. But prudence says, no, we're going to consider before letting this stuff in. Here's how Proverbs 14:15 talks about it. It uses the word prudence, but it renders it as sensible. The naive believes everything. Not a good way to be. But the sensible man considers his steps. See, you don't want an open mind. Solomon doesn't want you to have an open mind. He wants you to shut it and lock it with the deadbolt called prudence. And he says, I will even give you the deadbolt. It's right here in my book. But he says, there's also another group he wants to target. They are the youth. The youth. And you might hear that and say, well, I'm 22, I'm 26, I'm not a youth anymore. I'm a mature man, I'm a mature woman. But he's not talking about ages at all. That word is used in Scripture to describe anything from an infant, like a baby, to someone who's in their 30s. So this has nothing to do with age, numbers. It has everything to do with immaturity, right? A youth is somebody who's immature. And you know immature people, right? You know them. Maybe you got some of that in your life too. But immature people, it's like the teenager. Well, they're not a teenager, but they're living like they're a teenager. They just want to live at home in the basement and not pay rent. They don't want to get a job because work's hard. I just want to play video games and be the best at Super Smash Brothers. And they don't want to work and study and really improve themselves because that's just taxing. And I'm a fragile soul. And so I need mom and dad to make my meals and pay for car insurance and do my laundry and wake me up in the mornings. And what Solomon says is, no, you need to get out of that immaturity, right? These are people maybe who go to college and they change their major 5 times. Because they don't know what they want to do. And they're here and they're there and they're here and they're there like a bee jumping from flower to flower. And they don't really have any kind of definite purpose or consistent direction in life. They're pretty aimless. And I know that you know these kind of people, right? It's like the Peter Pans. They don't want to grow up. They want to live in Neverland forever where we just eat and sword fight. But at some point, you gotta move out of Neverland and you gotta live in the real land of the world. And so what these people, like the youth, the immature, what they need are guiding principles. Right? The old British author Charles Bridges lived in the 1800s. He says what the youth need are settled guiding principles for their lives. And Solomon knows that. That's why Solomon is saying, listen, if you're naive, if you're an immature person, please read my book. I have guiding principles for your life. Only Solomon calls them knowledge and discretion. But I want to focus on that word discretion. Discretion. It actually doesn't mean what you might think it means. Here, that word discretion means it's the power to make a successful plan. The idea is you make a practical plan and you follow through with it and it works. That's what this word discretion means here. Making a practical plan and following it through to the end. Right? And that is what so many young people need. Right? We need discretion. And some of you in your life, you need this word discretion. You don't have a plan. Right? And you are like a piece of driftwood bobbing in the seas, and wherever the current goes, that's where you go. But see, what Solomon says is, no, you need a purpose and a plan. Well, I just so happen to have one for you. It's in my book. And so he wants you to read this book and learn how to have a purpose and a plan, but not the world's way, right? God's way. So what you need is discretion. Reminds me, I just read a book about Facebook, the start of Facebook, how Mark Zuckerberg came up with the idea, developed it, and launched it into what you know it is today. And so he was a major nerd in college. They made the movie about him. I never saw it, but I read the book they made the movie from. And so he was a sophomore, super uber nerd, but absolutely brilliant. And he had the idea for a social network. He actually stole it from some other guys and then modified it and made it way better. But he said, like, hey, this thing's going to be huge. I'm going to do everything it takes to make this idea reality. So he would code. He's at Harvard, by the way, not a light load at school. Very, very challenging. But he's at Harvard, and he's coding 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, all night coding, right? And he's got this friend who's going to be his business partner in this venture. And the business partner is like, wow, he always looks like half dead because he's coding all the time to get this website ready to then launch and spread from campus to campus to campus. And so he even drops out of Harvard. He finishes his sophomore year. He doesn't go back. And you say, who drops out of Harvard? I would do anything to get into Harvard. But see, his plan, he was so committed to his plan of launching Facebook that he was willing to drop out of Harvard to make Facebook happen. And he's not a noble guy, by the way. He did a lot of shady stuff and stabbed a lot of people in the back. And I don't respect him at all as a man. But I respect and admire his commitment to his plan. Because he gave up everything, friends, school, time, everything to make Facebook work. And obviously it worked. He was doggedly committed to making Facebook work. And he did. And the man is not admirable, but his devotion to the plan and purpose was extremely impressive. That's the kind of commitment to purpose and plan that some of you need. Maybe you're better than just aimless and shiftless and no purpose, but maybe you don't have a really defined purpose. Maybe it's generally I'm going to move in that direction. And Solomon says, oh, I can help you. I can help you come up with plans that you execute and are successful at. But again, not plans to get money, to get rich, not plans to get power, not plans to be the best, but plans to have a successful life and honor God every step of the way. So what he offers you is what he calls here discretion. And I wonder if some of you wouldn't benefit from a little bit of that in your life. I give you Proverbs. Benefit number 6. Benefit number 6. This one comes in verse 5. It is wise counsel. Very different than the wise behavior we talked about earlier. Wise counsel is different. And notice, by the way, he gives a third group here, a third audience. He says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. Well, what he's not saying is, I'm only writing this book if you're naive, if you're immature, or if you're wise. No, he's just saying in particular, I want you to focus if you're those people. Everybody needs it because we're all naive or immature in certain ways. And even the wisest in this room recognize, I don't have all the wisdom I need. I need more wisdom. I want more wisdom. So I'm going to go to the Bible for this wisdom. And Solomon says, exactly. And I have that wisdom for you. So he says, a wise man will hear. Well, that's interesting. Hear. Hearing means you listen, but this word also has the implication of you respond. Not just information in, it's information in and then action taken. This is listening and responding. That idea of the wise man or a man of understanding will acquire, that has the idea of owning and possessing something. So this is investment into those ideas. What he wants you to own, I want you to hear this, I want you to own this. Solomon says, what I really want you to own, and I'm going to summarize it under the header of wise counsel. And that's a really neat word in the original language because it's actually like a nautical term, right? And what it pictures is a sailor who's an expert. And in those boats, they would use the ropes, right, to help navigate, either with the rudder or with the sails. And so this is a guy who's pulling the rope at the right time to go the right direction, moves the rudder in just the right way to go in the right place. And so you could think of this, actually one commentator says, you could think of it as navigational skills. But he's not talking about boating, he's talking about life. You need life navigational skills. Another author said, what Solomon is offering here is a way to steer a straight course through life. Not to get off track, not to get lost, but to have a straight course with purpose, with clarity, and with solid, consistent direction. Wise counsel. I remember a lot of years ago, I was really young. My sister invited me to go sailing with her. She doesn't have a sailboat, but her friend did. It was a 30-foot sailboat. I don't know if any of you have ever sailed before. 30-foot, pretty big boat, right? It's not the size of this table. It's enormous. Huge sails. And so apparently the guy, it was her friend, I think through her MBA program. And so she says, hey, come with me. I'm going to the lake. We're going to go sailing with my buddy. And so I go. Massive ship, right? The guy says, listen, I know you don't know how to sail. I just want you to have fun. He was going to do a race in the coming weeks. And so he's like, we're just going to practice the course. Right, you got to go. There's this buoy. You have to cut it real sharp and then head back. So we get up there, and if you've ever been sailing, especially if there's wind, then it's a very fun experience. And when you turn and there's a buoy, so you're trying to cut as sharply as possible, like the boat really leans. And so you got to hold on to the rope. And I'm holding on for dear life because the boat's like this, right? It's really pitched. But he's in the back navigating with the rudder and then trimming the sails and all kinds of stuff. Like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't sailing. But this guy was doing everything with the ropes. And then we would dart around the buoy and then race back. And it was really fun, really cool experience. But you can't sail if you don't know how to handle the ropes. This guy knew how to handle the ropes. And so what Solomon is saying to you is, I want to teach you how to handle the ropes of life. So that you can pilot your life like a boat in a straight direction. So you don't get way off course. Because bad decisions can take you way off course. But he says, I want to help you trim the sails and adjust the rudder so that you're on a direct path. So that you actually end up where you're trying to go. And I wonder if any of you need that in your life. Right? If you need wisdom navigating the complexities of life. I'm a son, which means I have a mom and a dad. And there are a lot of times when I need wisdom to know how to interact appropriately with my parents. How do I need to respond to this situation? And I'm more far removed from parent life, or being at home, I should say, than some of you are. Some of you are living at home. And there are definitely moments where you need real crystal clear wisdom, knowing how to navigate relationships with your mom and dad. Or how about with the opposite sex? Right? Most of you want to be in a relationship one day that turns into marriage, but it can be tricky to navigate a relationship. Even from a friendship to a romantic relationship, that can be tricky because a woman is real different from a man and a man is real different from a woman, and you don't want to blunder and stumble and fumble your way through. You kind of want to do it with clear, smooth direction. And there are a lot of ways you can mess it up. you need to know how to hold the rope, how to pull the ropes. Or at work, right? You all have, well, hopefully you all have jobs. And you're all going to work one day. Especially if you're a guy, you're going to work your whole life. If you're a lady, hopefully you're going to have a husband who will provide and you have kids and stay home. But for most of you, you're at a season where you have to work. And so, boy, it can be tricky to deal with bosses, right? Not all bosses are nice. And it can be tricky to deal with coworkers because some of your coworkers are scoundrels, right? And they're not pleasant people and they will stab you in the back if it gets them a raise. And maybe your boss just isn't any good, but he's your manager, but he's not a good manager, and it's really hard because he asks you to do stuff he doesn't train you to do. Well, that's frustrating. How do you navigate that? Solomon says, I can help you. What you need is wise counsel, because those are hard waters to steer through. But he says, I can help you with that. Last thing I want you to see, and we'll cover it quickly. The seventh benefit, we'll summarize it with the word knowledge. Summarize it with the word knowledge. Look at verse 6. To understand, and again, the idea is I want you to understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. That's the last piece of this thesis statement here, this purpose statement. 4 words. They have slightly different meanings. Let me give them real quick. You know what a proverb is, right? A statement that tells you the way life really is. Short, compact, loaded with truth. There are some 800 proverbs in this book. Next, he uses the word a figure. One kind of Bible dictionary lexicon says that is you can think of it as like satire, more of like a mocking poem. And not mocking in a mean way, but mocking in a way to expose foolishness and say, that's ridiculous behavior. You need to change. And so you will find those mocking poems and proverbs that expose your folly, show you what happens if you live in that foolish manner, with the implicit call to abandon that kind of silly living. Then he says there's words of the wise, right? Those are just other statements of wisdom that other wise guys have written, and he collected them and put it in here, right? That's the section from chapter 22:17 all the way to chapter 24, verse 34. Those are the sayings of the wise. And lastly, he says there are these things called riddles. Basically, it's an enigma. It's a mystery. It's a very difficult statement that requires significant mental energy to comprehend. He's not saying riddle like, some impossible mind challenge. He's saying, no, these are statements that they convey truth, but if you're lazy, you won't understand the truth of it. Right? You have to really think deeply and ponder and consider and meditate on and try to understand it. Which, incidentally, is really tough for people in our generation because we're so used to like immediate stimulus on the phone or on the TV, and we don't like to think hard about anything. Right? It's way easier to pick up your phone and scroll and watch, videos on TikTok than to pick up any book and read it. Because books require more effort than does an image on TikTok or Instagram, right? We're mentally just lazy. Naturally, we're lazy in the mind. And so these riddles don't permit lazy thinking. If you want to access that part of the wisdom that Solomon is offering, you can't be a lazy-minded person. You're going to have to work hard to figure out what the truth is. But that truth is valuable. It's like finding a diamond. Well, they have to mine for diamonds. They're not on top of the earth. They got to burrow way deep into the earth with massive equipment to carry out tons of dirt and then sort through the dirt. And then, wow, you find the diamond. And then you got to cut it and polish it. But then you sell it for a lot of money, right? There are diamonds buried in this book, all over this book. And Solomon says they're going to be called riddles, but you don't access them with lazy effort. No, it's hard, but if you work hard, you will access that diamond of wisdom. So in summary, Solomon says, I want you to read my book because it has immense value for you. Immense value for you. 7 practical benefits. And he goes to the trouble to tell you right at the very front, the very beginning of the book, here's why you need my book, right? I want to bless your life. I want you to gain wisdom, knowledge, discretion, wise counsel, wise behavior, all of the things we talked about. Solomon says, it's here for you. Question is, are you going to read the book? You're going to search the pages. You're going to study the Proverbs. Are you going to glean the wisdom that Solomon has spread out before you like a buffet in the book of Proverbs? That's why we're going to read this book, because I personally think I need those 7 benefits, and I also happen to believe you do too. Right? And as young people, I really want you to learn this stuff early in life. It will save you a bunch of trouble, a bunch of heartache and headache and pain if you'll learn these things today or start learning these things. Right? So I'm going to repeat my encouragement. Proverbs has 31 chapters. So do most months, right? So read 1 chapter of Proverbs a day. A bunch of you, I think, already did it. I would encourage you, keep going. If you haven't started, start, right? 1 chapter of Proverbs a day. Today's the 12th, so read Proverbs 12. Tomorrow's the 13th. Read 13. At the end of the month, maybe you have to read 2 days, depending on how many days are in this month. And then on December 1, you go back to the first chapter of Proverbs and you keep reading, right? And as you do that, you will begin to discover these 7 benefits. And you'll never fully mine all of these benefits out of the book, which is great because you can keep learning wisdom your whole life. But I want you to begin to do this so that as we go on a journey together, if you're naive in this room, well, in 6 months, you won't be naive anymore. If you're immature, well, in 6 months, you won't be that person anymore. You will have learned what Solomon has for you here. And then you keep learning for the rest of your life. Does that make sense? That's where we're headed. We're going to spend the next months picking out these 7 benefits, one by one by one by one, for different areas of your life. That's Solomon's thesis statement, to bless you in 7 different ways. Why don't we pray with me? Father, thank you for our time. Thank you for the wisdom of Solomon, for recording 800 Proverbs so that we could think about them and meditate on them and ponder them and consider them. And Lord, we know that this is not earthly wisdom, it's divine. It's not human wisdom, it's godly wisdom. And so the benefit it offers is staggering. And if wisdom really is better than gold or silver, then Lord, I pray that the guys and the girls in this room will pursue wisdom. Lord, that they will make it a priority to pursue the wisdom of Scripture, in particular in Proverbs. But of course, we know that Christ is the absolute source of wisdom. He is the wisdom of God. So may they pursue this wisdom both in Proverbs and ultimately in a relationship, a vibrant, living, active relationship with Jesus Christ, which only comes by repenting from sin and trusting in Jesus. May that be who we are, those who have repented and believed in Christ and are pursuing the wisdom in the Word. Help us to do that, Father, we pray. Amen.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to our Redeemer YouTube channel. If this is helpful for you, please make sure that you like this video, smash the subscribe button, and hit that bell icon. It will help us reach more people with biblical truth. Thank you so much.